Well, very good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Newark and Sherwood District Council Planning Committee, which is being held in a remote manner in accordance with the 2020 regulations brought into force by the government in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting is being streamed live, so welcome not just to the members of the committee who you can see on the screen, but to parish councillors, ward members and others who will be watching our proceedings via the YouTube channel. Now, our procedure this evening, as agreed following legal advice, will be for the officer to present their report on the individual item on our agenda, and I, as chairman, will then formally move the officer recommendation and ask the vice chairman to second that recommendation. And I emphasise that does not mean predetermination on either my part or the vice chairman's part. It is purely a procedural matter. We will then call a representative of the parish council, if any, to make their representation, and then invite members of the committee to contribute. And I'd ask members of the committee, if they wish to contribute, we have the yellow hand facility, and use that please if you wish to talk. At the end of the debate, we'll invite the committee clerk to proceed with a recorded vote. Before proceeding, could I invite all members and others to mute their devices except when they are speaking. Also remind members that we did receive late representations sent by Catherine Saxton to all members at 16:34 yesterday afternoon. And I hope that you've had a chance both to see and to read and consider the content of those. I don't think there's anything I need to say more by way of introduction, so let's go straight to the agenda we have before us. And let us start with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Helen?
I don't have any apologies for absence, Chairman, but just to note that Councillor Brock is still attempting to get in. We've got ICT calling him to help. Okay, well, we hope he can join us shortly, and I apologise for the slightly late start. We have had some IT difficulties this afternoon. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest by members or officers. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Could I declare an interest in agenda item number 11? I'm a director of Active for Today. Agenda item number 8, I'm also a director of Active for Today and appear to be a beneficiary of potential still money should the proposal be approved. And agenda item number 7, I attended the planning committee as a representative of the town council many years ago on the application that's referred to in the report. However, I will review and decide this with a fresh and open mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on the list I've got in front of me, move on to Councillor Mrs Dales.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm on Trent Valley Drainage Board.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maureen Dobson. Sorry, Maureen, you're still muted.
Take myself off. I'm not now.
You're not now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. I declared a personal interest on item number 5 last time. I declared the same personal interest only because I'd known the next door neighbour for God knows how many years, and all the children went to school together. So I have no personal problems with still discussing it and voting on it.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mrs Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. I will give a personal interest on agenda item number 9. I have been involved in another place with discussions, but I'm happy to leave it and listen to everybody's comments before I make a decision how to vote.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ivor Walker.
Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item number 10 was made mention of a freight company on the bottom of page 130, which is in my family ownership, as indeed is the land in between Seven Hills and the said freight company. But I don't think it will alter my decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Exactly the same as Councillor Skinner. I was on the Newark Town Council when this originally came up, but I will look at it again under different eyes today. Okay,
thank you very much. I have no other.
Mr. Chairman, I suppose I was probably on the planning committee as well, so I'll have to do the same. I was on the planning committee, and I have an open mind to.
Thank you. That's Councillor Goff is planning committee at Newark Town Council, I assume.
Yeah, right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. All of those declarations of interest will be recorded in the minutes. Agenda item 3, I've already confirmed that we are recording this meeting for posterity. And agenda item 4 is approval of the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of March. Is that agreed by everybody?
Chairman,
yes, thank you very much. Is that a legacy hand, Councillor Mrs. Addington? Yes, thank you. We move on to items for decision, and let me just mention that I will be taking agenda item 13A, which has been circulated to all members as an electronic as opposed to a hard copy, and that's the proposed response to the Downtown Designer Outlet Centre at Grantham, a reconsultation on an application that the committee considered in 2019, in February 2019. So we'll take that as agenda item 13A. So let us therefore move on to agenda item 5, International Export Packages Limited, PA Freight, Farndon Road. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will note that this application relates to the gantry structure and the crane that was previously considered by committee back in 2015. The application is presented to committee because Councillor Girling has called it in for the reasons set out on page 11 of the agenda, primarily relating to the size, height and positioning and the prominence of the structure, which he considers has an unacceptable impact upon the amenity of adjoining neighbours. We'll note from the list of consultation responses that Newark Town Council have objected due to the lack of a flood risk assessment. This is their only objection. They haven't objected on any other grounds. However, following receipt of the application, the applicant has submitted an FRA. And there's been no comments received from Farndon Parish Council. In terms of all the consultee comments, you'll note that there is no objection from any of the consultees, subject to a number of conditions. 3 letters of representation have been received, which are set out on pages 14 and 15 of the agenda. And these are all addressed within the report. So, as mentioned, the site is within a flood zone and therefore we've needed the FRA, and it's also within the Newark urban area. So therefore there is a presumption in favour of development for employment uses. Committee granted back in 2015 the application on a temporary basis of 3 years, and at that time members understood that it was only going to be the crane that was needed on site. However, the crane actually needs to be enclosed within the structure to ensure that it operates and is protected from the elements. And you'll see from the slides, which are set out from slide number 3 to number 12, but if I may direct you to slide 5, you can in fact see the building in the top left-hand corner of the photographs on that. So the building isn't insubstantial. However, when you look at the building in the context of the Leylandii trees surrounding the area, which are more evident in slide 8, as well as within the photographs within the committee report, you will see the Leylandii are incredibly tall. And it would appear, obviously we can't measure the height of them, but they look to be twice as high as the structure. So they do screen this development site from wider views from the A46. The nearest neighbours most likely to be affected are the little sheltered accommodation bungalows to the rear of the site. And again, referring to slide 8, you can see in the top left-hand corner the end elevation of one of the bungalows and the Leylandii trees next to it. And just the other side of those trees is this structure. And I think you can see from that photograph that the impact of the development is far less with those trees being present. Environmental Health have have confirmed they've received no complaints in relation to noise impacts, nor have they received any complaints in relation to high hedges. The flood issues have all been addressed, and the Environment Agency removed their objection, which was originally submitted because of lack of FRA, subject to a condition which is suggested at condition 4. The proposal is supported by Core Policy 6, and officers considers there's no other material reasons to withhold planning permission. So it's therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives set out on pages 21 and 22 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. I formally move approval in accordance with the officer recommendation and subject to the conditions listed before us. Vice Chairman.
I second it in accordance with the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Mrs Woodhead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering in relation to these trees, these Leylandii, I've got it somewhere in my head that they have a limited lifespan. I'm not sure if I'm right on that, and if I am, which way are these trees going to fall?
I think there are almost 2 points in that question. Which way are they going to fall, and what happens if they do fall in terms of providing the screening? But Lisa, are you able to answer on either of those?
Unfortunately, I'm not a tree expert, so I don't know the answer to how long their life is. And again, I'm guessing in terms of where they might fall, should they do so, it's going to depend on so many factors. For instance, if they're getting weak and there's wind, it'd be likely to go in the direction of the wind. However, in terms of this application, that question I would say is not relevant insofar as the potential falling of them. The owner of the trees, which I believe is likely to be PA Freight, would obviously need to make sure that they are of a condition that is unlikely to cause any damage to any property, either their own, because obviously they've got the vested interest, or any of the surrounding residents. We do have a condition recommended in relation to replacement planting, should any of the trees fail, I should say, and that is very similar to the condition that was attached to the previous 2015 permission. However, the only caveat compared to the previous one is that required trees to be replanted of the same height. However, the one bit I do know about trees is if you plant a very mature tree in a new location, you're pretty much guaranteed it's going to fail. So we have modified that condition.
Okay, thank you. And that's condition 3 on page 21 of the agenda members have got. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, with regard to the trees, the only reason I can see if they're going to fall is if they don't get a lot of water on the roots. But the trees, I do believe, can deaden some of the sound that's coming from the new development. And I can see no reason why I shouldn't vote for officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Saddington, and I think I saw Councillor Mrs Dobson. So Councillor Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points really. I remember when an application, not this one, an application came before, and I think it was something to do with burning, because I remember going round to the cottages to have a look at the effect of the fire. or smoke or whatever it was. It's a while ago. I don't know whether it was 215 or 219. However, it was mentioned at the time that those trees, as Councillor Crow's just alluded to, would stop the view of, this particular case, it was the smoke and the noise. But if we look at the trees, being realistic, I think we all know about Leylandii trees. They're cheap to put in and terribly expensive to take out. I know from personal experience. But looking at them, they don't look as if they've got a lot of life in them. And I remember them coming up in discussion when we discussed the smoke that was affecting those people in the houses. Now, if these trees had to come down, and I can't see they've got a very long life looking at them, they look in dire straits, and I think they're only left there because of the last problem. Those people are not only going to be affected by the fact the trees have come down, but they're going to be affected surely by noise, because there will be nothing to stop the noise going across to those houses, apart from the view, which will be absolutely awful. Is there no way, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a tree expert, I'm like Lisa, our tree expert is Councillor Ivor Walker, probably. But is there no way that some trees could be put up away so that they're growing? Because in theory, these things are so high, it would take years to get to this height if anything untoward makes those trees have to come down. And the ugly sight, and if they're still burning rubbish, the problem of the rubbish being burnt would be absolutely dreadful for these people. And since they're senior people, they may not have the wherewithal to be able to complain. And I think we should be looking at their interests on this application.
I'm wondering whether those are planning matters, Lisa, or matters that can be addressed by environmental health. Should either noise or should smoke pollution arise?
Probably a bit of both. So in terms of noise, if the trees weren't there tomorrow and noise complaints were received, then the Environmental Health Department, if they agreed with the complaints, would require the PA Freight to put in measures to help mitigate that noise. And they have to undertake best reasonable measures in order to secure that. However, I completely agree in relation to your concerns regarding the trees, and they don't look like they've got a long life. However, they could have, for as far as I'm concerned. I was just trying to look at the plan because the building is very close to the boundary. So any new planting, which we could require by condition, has to have sufficient space to be planted and then to ensure that it might grow. My one concern regarding a potential condition is when you've got the factor of existing Leylandii tree there, which are quite tall and they're dominant and it's their home. Next to the building, their new planting would be less likely to get light and water. So that might automatically fail as well. So I think in theory, we could attach a condition requiring planting to be put in, but what I would like to do is, if members resolve that that is what they would like us to consider, is to enable us to go to our landscape officer to say, do you think trees or any other sort of planting in this location would survive?
Lisa, would it be possible to indicate a condition relating to the noise impact upon the residents of Willow Cottages, and that the noise impact should be no greater than is currently the case, either as a result of replanting or as a result of other measures, should the current trees cease to be there?
We would have to look at that. This application, to my knowledge, hasn't submitted a noise report. So we've got no benchmark in which to monitor any future mitigation. And ideally you would know that, say, like it's 40 decibels now in order to prevent it. So that assessment would have to be made, and it's on land outside of the applicant's ownership, because it would have to be within the sheltered housing. So yes, it's theoretically possible, but I'm not sure that it's reasonable.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, could I just answer a comment that Sue Saddington's made? I was also on that site visit. It's going back to 2015. David Payne was chairman of planning. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't to do with smoke. It was to do with the height of the containers that had suddenly appeared and were stacked up there and took all the light and the amenity away from those cottages in particular. So I, like Councillor Girling, think the size, the height and the positioning and provenance of the application for the gantry is out of order. This particular application, PA Freight, came before us a long time ago on and off, and we as an authority via Matt Lamb actually suggested that we help them move south of Newark onto what one would term as a semi-industrial area, which we have south of Newark. This is a totally inappropriate place. That's why we only gave PA Freight a 3-year licence, but everybody seems to have forgotten that. Perhaps there's no minutes that said that, I don't know. But my minutes say that we gave them a 3-year licence because they were going to find, with our help, economic help, to move down south of Newark or near the A1 and the A46. I think this area is totally inappropriate for anything to do with industrial use. It's 7 days a week, and I understand, rightly or wrongly, the noise from the gantry is appalling. It's whirring all the time, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will, Roger, isn't it operating from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, something like that?
The hours of operation in condition 2 on page 21, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mondays to Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sundays and bank holidays.
Well, in other words, the residents round there get absolutely no break from anything. So that's why I don't want to see PA Freight go out of business. I don't want to lose PA Freight. They employ people, but they employ a lot of people now. And now the noise is becoming totally unsuitable for that area. I really do think we need to keep the promise, and also PA Freight need to keep the promise that it was only for temporary use. So we found somewhere south of Newark. And I think that's what we should be doing. I don't know how we can even consider approving this planning application on those sort of hours for the people that live there. Those willow cottages were built for the elderly. There's also some housing round there as well, not just Willow Cottage. There's Cranley Park at the back, the big house at the back, but it's surrounded by residents. How can we do this? It is wrong. We need to, but as far as tonight is concerned, it's to do with the gantry and the structure. We haven't got a noise. We haven't done a noise evaluation. Lisa's just told us that. So therefore, it should be deferred until that is done. And at the same time, that we as an authority should be having a discussion with PA Freight to see how we can assist them to move into a better place. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, I would second Councillor Dobson's request there that it's deferred. I think we should at least have a noise assessment.
Okay, can I just remind members that Lisa did say that the Environmental Health Officer has confirmed they've received no complaints about noise. Secondly, can I just correct Councillor Mrs Dobson in one respect, Maureen? You're absolutely right. The application before us in 2015 was an application that wasn't time limited. It was a decision of the committee to go against the recommendation of the officers and to limit it for a 3-year period, because at that time as I was able to report as then leader of the council, the then chief executive and I had discussions with the managing director and others at PA Freight, and made the points that you made, that we were supportive of them, but felt that if they had ambitions to expand, and this crane was brought from the site at Swinderby, which they were leasing, and I believe the lease was expiring or they were giving up the lease. If they saw further expansion, it may be appropriate for them to have gone on a industrial site in an industrial estate, and we would assist in that. PA Freight did not, and this is the slight correction, promise that they would do that. They did promise they'd enter into discussions, but as a result of those discussions, they determined they'd stay where they were. So I think just for the correction of the record, one should say that. We had hopes, but they didn't make promises to fulfill those hopes of ours. Councillor Gough.
Chairman, can I just come back and say, you've just said if they were going to expand, they have expanded to a great extent compared with how they were 3 years ago.
That's correct,
Thank
but
you.
I'm making the point that they didn't promise to move. Councillor Gough.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I live a few minutes away from the Willow Cottages, so as a cyclist, I go past there when I'm going to Farden or wherever I'm going. So I am familiar with the site. I am familiar with the residents that live there, who are mostly elderly, like you say. I am concerned about their well-being, so I won't be supporting this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Thank you, Chairman. You've actually cleared something up for me by saying that they don't really intend to move. I mean, I was going to say I have a degree of sympathy with them, because 3 years isn't a long time. Believe you me, when you're trying to relocate a business of that size, you have to take a lot into consideration. But it is a successful business, obviously, and sadly, this type of business, it doesn't run 9 to 5, 5 days a week. You know, it is virtually around the clock, 7 days a week, and you have to do that to be in the game and to be competitive. So I do have my sympathies. I was on that last site visit, and it is an overbearing impact on those cottages. In fact, one lady, I don't think she ever got her washing dry because it was completely in shadow of the Leylandii trees. But it is a difficult one. I mean, either deferral or could we consider another temporary permission? I'm not sure, but if they're going to stay there, then they'll obviously be looking for more than for a temporary permission, won't they?
Okay, thank you. Although, of course, there's no further construction work taking place, given that the shed within which the gantry is located was erected, and this is a retrospective application in that sense. It wasn't part of the original 2015 temporary consent. Councillor Mrs. Holloway.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered whether it would be possible to put a condition on for some acoustic fencing to be put between the Willow Cottages and the site to help with any noise screening.
Okay, Lisa, can I throw that question to you, and also perhaps Councillor Mrs. Rainbow's question about the appropriateness of a further temporary consent, and I'm very conscious of the officer recommendation, usual recommendation, that one shouldn't continue with temporary consents.
Yeah, in relation to the acoustic fencing, and in fact my answer for both is very, very similar. Any conditions that we attach have to be reasonable. So we've had no indication from Environmental Health that acoustic fencing is needed, and they've appraised the scheme, and they appraised it as if it was a new scheme. From my discussions, I don't think they'd appreciated that the development was already there. And as the report sets out, we haven't received any objections in relation to noise. In relation to temporary permission, as Councillor Blaney has said, they should only be used in exceptional circumstances. So I can understand from reading the minutes why a temporary was attached previously. However, I don't think it's reasonable to consider to keep adding a temporary consent. The development is either acceptable or it's not. If there's concerns in the future regarding trees falling or having to be felled, such that mitigation is needed, such as an acoustic fence, then that would obviously have to be addressed by the owners at that time. So I think members need to consider this either as a permanent permission or for reasonable reasons to refuse the application.
Okay, well, I'm assuming, thank you. I'm assuming, Rona, that's still a legacy hand, but I note that Yvonne, Councillor Mrs. Woodhead, has put her hand up again. You have spoken, but do come back, Yvonne, if it's a new point.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's these trees that are worrying me, because if they fall on the bungalows, how safe is the residents there? That was my point in the first place. If these trees fall on the actual site we're talking about, then fine, it's their liability. They know it's there. And I believe from somewhere back in the past, these trees have a lifespan between 20 and 25 years. But if they come down on the bungalows, then whose responsibility is that? And, you know,
I think
it doesn't bode well.
I think the responsibility would be that of the landowner on whose land the trees were located. And we've heard that it's our understanding that that is PA Freight, and certainly the number of conifers planted around the site, as one can see from slide 10 that members have before them, is quite extensive. So the implication is that the company have been responsible, perhaps some would say appropriately, for seeking to shield their operation as much as possible. But your point has been made. I can't see any other member wishing to speak. Like Councillor Mrs. Dobson and Councillor Mrs. plural, Dobson, Saddington and Rainbow, I was on the committee in 2015 when this came before us. I've said that already. In her report, Lisa referenced the fact that members may not have understood that the shed was going to be built around the gantry. I'm not sure that is quite accurate. It wasn't that we didn't understand it, it was that we weren't told it. And I believe I'm right in saying that the application did not include any reference to a shed, nor did the temporary consent include permission for a shed. That it was subsequently put up without planning permission, when planning permission was required, is a matter of regret. The fact, however, it was put up and wasn't brought to our attention until the application for the this current application came before us is, dare I suggest, an indication of how well screened this site is from public view. Although I believe, and the record will show, that the neighbour to whom Councillor Mrs. Dobson made reference may have mentioned this previously, but it is a matter of regret that the applicant didn't indicate with the gantry that there were electrics that needed protection from the weather, and just went ahead seemingly and installed that. All of that having been said, I went and visited this site on Sunday, and I walked down the path of Willow Cottages and through to have a look at number 12 and number 14. And the impact of the shed shrouding the gantry was no greater than the impact we saw when we went on site in 2015, in my view. I also looked at it from the newly constructed road, which leads into PA Freight and the neighbouring private residence, and it was fairly unobtrusive, as the slide we have on slide 5 indicates. And therefore, on that basis, I'm not sure what grounds there would be for not allowing this consent, given what's been advised to us of the inappropriateness of granting ongoing temporary consents. So I will not be supporting deferral, and I will certainly, after we put deferral, if that is not carried, I'll be asking for the proposal of approval to be put to the vote. So without further ado, it has been proposed and seconded for deferral. That trumps an proposal for approval. So Helen, can we go to the recorded vote, please? Oh, Pardip, sorry, you wish to come in. Pardip, you're muted, and I'm inviting you to address us as our legal representative.
Yes, Chair, just a couple of points. The first point I just wanted to reiterate is that there is a lot of concern clearly about noise. And as members are aware, outside of the planning regime, we have got robust statutory measures under the Environmental Health Act, to deal with the matter of noise. And the other point, Chair, I just wanted to quickly make is there's a lot of, I'm no tree expert, but a lot of questions have been asked about the life of trees. And I just wanted to say that whilst, we were talking, a quick Google search has actually revealed that some of these trees have a lifespan of 100 years. Now, again, I'm not saying that information is accurate, but I just thought I would just mention that because the point was actually made about the life of these trees. The other point, the third point I just wanted to mention just is a matter of the procedure. Basically, Chair, a motion was actually moved to approve the application, and that motion was then seconded. So as I understand it, has there been an amendment to that motion?
Yes, there has, Pardip.
Sorry.
Moved by Councillor Mrs Dobson, seconded by Councillor Saddington for deferral. I've always understood, and please correct me, I've always understood that deferral is an approved amendment to a motion of either approve or refuse, and therefore is put first.
That's fine, Chair. I was just double checking. That's
yeah, no, absolutely fine. Thank you, Pardip. Helen, without further ado, can I invite you to put the motion of the amendment of deferral?
Okay. Councillor Blaney.
Against.
Councillor Brazier.
Against.
Councillor Brock.
I missed most of the debate and therefore I shall not vote.
Okay. Councillor Crowe. You're on mute.
Against.
Against.
And Councillor Mrs Dales had indicated to me that her connection dropped out a couple of times. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I'm back now, but I missed most of the debate.
Okay.
So I will not vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Dobson.
4.
Councillor Gough.
4.
Councillor Mrs Holloway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
4.
Councillor Skinner.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
And Councillor Mrs Woodhead.
Against.
So that's 9 against and 4 for deferral, so that falls.
Thank you very much. And before I invite you to put the proposition of approval, when I was there on Sunday, I noticed a significant number of very large blocks of concrete, the sort of things that are often used to prevent access to a site, including blocks of concrete on the former access to this site, which members will recall was the subject of a long-running dispute with Highways England, and which led to the newly constructed access for this operation and indeed for the adjoining residential property. They are not the most attractive of things, and this is the entrance to Newark. I fully understand, and I've checked this with the officers, that there is nothing that we can do by way of condition to require their removal, but I would invite the officers either through an informative to the applicants or through consideration of action with the enforcement team to see whether we can't improve the situation and get those removed or certainly significantly reduced. Lisa, I had raised this with you previously. You've indicated you want to comment, so do so, please.
Yes, what Pardip and I did after we had that discussion was have a look at the conditions attached to the planning permission that members determined, I think it was October last year, in relation to the lorry park. And there is a requirement, I think it's condition 4, but it could be 9, on that for the former area to be broken up and to be landscaped prior to or just post the lorry park being first used. So as soon as that is triggered, then all the necessary tidying up of that area to make it look far better will happen anyway.
Lovely, thank you. And my belief, and I didn't have an exact layout in front of me when I was viewing it, is that the actual access to the lorry holding area that was granted permission under that application is itself blocked by these large blocks of concrete. In fact, the operation looked more closed than open, although I know that you were there during the working week and you reported differently. So can we monitor the position there, please? And yes. I'm sure Councillor Gough, when he is cycling past, will be keeping an eye on it as well and letting you as officers know if the lorry park is in operation and the blocks are still there. Thank you for that. So Helen, let's go to the vote on approval.
Okay. Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4.
Councillor Brock.
No vote.
Okay. Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Dale, so we're the same.
Yeah, I cannot vote.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Against.
Councillor Gough.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
Councillor Keith Walker.
Against.
And Councillor Mrs Woodhead.
Against.
So that's 8, 4 and 5 against.
Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 6, residential redevelopment of a farm complex at Bankwood Farm, Oxton Road, Thurgerton. Julia, hello, and do address us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So we're now on page 24 of the agenda and slide 13 in the presentation. Considering an application for 5 new dwellings and 1 barn conversion at a farm complex known as Bankwood Farm near Thurgerton. Members may be familiar with the proposal as a very similar application was granted planning permission back in August 2019 by the committee, contrary to the officer recommendation. Now, the only difference between this application and the extant permission is the removal of the words self-build from the description of the development and a squaring off of the red line application site along the southern boundary. And this squaring off is shown on the site plan on page 26 of the agenda. Other than this, the application is identical to the scheme previously approved. So if we turn now to slide 13, the site is in the middle of the open countryside, served by a long, largely single-width tarmac access road that leads south from Oxton Road, adjacent to Hollybeck Garden Centre. The access road is a private road, and it also forms Thurgerton Bridleway number 1, as well as 2 public footpaths that link into it. So it does have a multifunctional use for cars, pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders. So slide 14 has photographs of the existing large modern agricultural buildings, in addition to the stone threshing barn that's currently on the site. And slide 15 shows the existing layout. Below that, on slide 16, is the proposed layout, with 2 plots to the southwest of the access road and 4 plots to the northeast of the road. Slide 27 shows the proposed barn conversion, and slides 18 to 27 show the plans and elevations of the other new build dwellings. There's also a helpful visual at slide 28, and this shows the barn at the top, and 2 plots adjacent to it, a white building and a red U-shaped building opposite the barn. These are more traditional in appearance, whereas the 3 larger buildings with dark and grey roofs on this visual are more contemporary in style and design. So slides 29 to 33 provide further indicative visuals of the whole development. In terms of consultation, Thurgerton Parish Council, the host parish, remain firmly in support of the application on the basis that, in their view, it complies with the now paragraph 79 of the NPPF, that this proposal represents a truly outstanding or innovative design. It would represent an improvement to the visual amenities of the area, and they consider would be preferred to the scheme to convert 3 existing buildings to form 5 dwellings that have been approved via the prior notification process on the site. Notably, however, members, the Highway Authority and the Rights of Way Officer object to the application, despite raising no concerns in response to the previous application. Their comments are set out in full in the report and predominantly relate to the conflict between the increased car traffic that would be introduced to the access road, along with walkers, cyclists and horse riders. Further clarification was sought to understand this change of stance. The old application was considered against the former highway design guide, which allowed private drives with no footpaths to serve up to 25 dwellings. However, in January 2021, a new highway design guide was adopted, which states a private road should have no wider movement function, i.e. as a bridleway or as a right-of-way, and it should also serve a maximum of 5 dwellings. Anything above this should be designed to adoptable standard. This is now a new material planning consideration, which should be given weight in the balance. This private road already serves more than 5 dwellings. Whilst the conflict between vehicles and horses, bikes and walkers would increase as a result of this proposal, it must also be acknowledged that the same proposal, albeit to be built by 5 different people, could be commenced tomorrow, subject to discharger conditions, a factor which must also be given significant weight in this case. I would now take this opportunity to draw members to the late item schedule. As set out in this schedule, I must apologise and correct an error that's been set out in the report. On page 47 of the report, it makes reference to council advice stating that legally only one person can apply for a licence concerning bats, which makes the current extant permission unimplementable in legal terms. And this therefore reduces the weight that can be afforded to the extant permission. But this is incorrect. In fact, council's advice confirmed that a single application using the route approach could adequately deal with this matter. So as such, the legal technicality reducing the weight to be applied in the overall planning balance on page 50 must be removed, and full weight must be afforded to the current extant permission. The consequence of this adds more weight to the recommendation of approval presented to members today. I would also point out a summary of an email from the agent on late items, setting out additional comments, as well as a copy of his letter which accompanied the application, which was not available to view on the council's website. The agent's letter refers to the previous decision of this committee on the extant permission as being a unanimous decision in favour from the members. But in fact, the vote was 9 for and 3 against. 3 letters of objection have been received from interested parties, which are summarised within the report, and these matters raised have been addressed within the officer report. So in summary, the professional opinion of officers remain that this application should be refused in line with the previous officer report, and the newly received objections from the Highway Authority and right-of-way officer must also be taken into account as a material consideration. I find that substantial weight must be afforded to secure the consistency of decision making by this local planning authority, however, to a virtually identical proposal that still can be implemented until August 2022. So the recommendation is that the overall planning balance, therefore, weighs in favour of approval in these particular circumstances. It's recommended that the approval is subject to the conditions set out on pages 55 to 57 of the agenda, and members will note that condition 1 has limited the commencement of development to the same date as that on the extant permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. So in essence, the only change is, as Julia has said, from consent being for self-build to consent being by a developer. And with, presumably, Julia, the self-same date and the fact that therefore the current application will remain extant, that gives them the choice of either self-build or of having a developer. Am I right on that point?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Okay, so that is the only change. Apart from the fact, of course, that with the application before us, community infrastructure levy will be chargeable, as it wouldn't be on self-build, and members can see from page 57, that is the not insignificant amount of £277,000, which would hand to Thurgerton Parish Council a sum in excess of £40,000, which, having represented that parish council for 25 years, I'm sure that they will find an exceptionally good use for that, should those funds be made available to them. I formally move approval in accordance with the officer recommendation. Vice Chairman?
Seconded, Chairman, in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I should be consistent with my observations last time. I like this scheme. I think it's creative. I think it shows a lot of imagination, and there is a lot to like about it. My main reservation, as it was last time, is to do with access, to do with safety. I think that is significant. But equally, I take on board the technical points which have been made and realise we are where we are. But just by way of balance on the argument, that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mrs Dales.
Well, Councillor Brock's just said it really. I was one of the 9 that voted for this last time. I remember it well. The site visit. My view at the time was that this was of a sufficiently high design and standard specification to warrant this development going ahead. And I note the points made by Julia, but I remain in support of this application.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got no option. They've already got an extant permission. The fact that highways and rights of way have now come in and passed comment but didn't pass comment before, then, you know, sorry, they should have removed Digit and done just that and drew certain things to our attention, because the one thing that does concern me is cars, horses and pedestrians and cyclists don't always mix very well. But I don't see any option but to grant permission. Thank you.
Well, as one of the 3 who opposed this application last time, I'm going to have to be inconsistent, because having granted consent contrary to the officer recommendation, as Julia has made clear, whilst that remains their professional view, full weight has to be given to the fact that the planning committee determined otherwise, and I have to do the same. So I will also be supporting this application, however reluctantly. I can't see anybody else wishing to speak. This question of the access and interaction between cars, horse riders and pedestrians is one that concerns me. One looks at the plan on page 59 of the agenda before us. It indicates in terms of the red line that this goes all the way up to Oxton Road. And to those who know this particular access from Oxton Road, they will know that 100, perhaps 150 yards down it is on the right-hand side as you're coming from Oxton Road, the access to Hollybeck nurseries, which started as a very small operation, is now a much larger operation and a very successful operation. And long may it remain so, with a very popular cafe sort of restaurant area. The road has been widened, still a private road, but has been widened down to the access into Hollybeck. But I know from personal experience that the egress from the car park at Hollybeck onto this road is not the easiest, because you are approaching it almost as if you are going straight up towards the junction with Oxton Road. You're looking back over your shoulder to see if anything is coming from the Thurgerton Quarters and Bankwood Farm complexes, and your vision is obstructed. So I have asked the officers whether there is anything we can do, either by way of an informative, to seek to get some signage or sleeping policemen by way of negotiation to just slow the speed of traffic coming towards that access to Hollybeck. I don't know, Lisa or Julia, whether after our discussion at the committee briefing this morning, whether you have any thoughts on either of those, an informative or anything else. I'm very conscious there is uncertainty as to whether the applicants own all of that access, as is indicated on that plan before us.
Yes, yes, Chairman, we've managed to establish that the access at that point is not owned by the applicant. Okay. It is owned by a third party. So it probably means that probably the most we could do is an informative rather than anything else.
I think it may be helpful. Members have mentioned, myself obviously included, the concern on safety. It was part of the concern voiced by Southwell Town Council, within whose area the access off Oxton Road is, although amazingly to some members thinking, the whole of this site, apart from that, perhaps 200 yards, is within Thurgerton parish council area. So I'd like to put a suggestion before we go to the vote that we do put an informative on, that we do note the concerns about access and the junction with the Hollybeck nurseries, and do invite the applicants to consider whether signage or other road speed slowing measures could be in place, because I am conscious that putting another 5 properties down there is going to increase meaningfully the amount of traffic. If members are happy with that, can I include that in the proposition that we'll now go to the vote on? I'm not getting any indication of dissent on that.
Second,
Yes.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Yeah, Maureen.
Chairman, well, perhaps include conversations with the Highways Authority. Now they've decided to join. The development control team have now decided to join us on this one. Perhaps they should be included, or at least the Rights of Way Department, because I'm conscious that there's not just going to be people riding horses and cyclists down there, but there's also going to be a huge amount of ramblers.
Yes, so perhaps within the informative we refer both to rights of way and to highways, and we would welcome discussions with both of those departments on what measures may be appropriate, recognising it is an informative, it can't be a condition. And indeed it doesn't apply as an informative on the extant consent anyway. Yeah. Okay, Helen, let's go to the vote therefore.
Okay. Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4.
Councillor Brock.
With hesitation, 4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Mrs Dales.
4.
Councillor Goff.
4.
Councillor Mrs Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
4.
Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
Would you like to come back to me? You missed me.
No, I'm sorry. I just
Don't worry
realised.
about it.
I'm so sorry. I will. Can I come? Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
Councillor Mrs Woodhead.
4.
And with my apologies, and last but not least, Mrs Dobson.
No, 4. Don't worry about it.
That's carried.
That's unanimous, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. We now move on to agenda item 7, Parkview Caravan Park, Tolney Lane. And apologies to the agent, whilst we spelt his name correctly, we spelt the name of his company incorrectly. But let's move on to this one. I think, Julia, it's yours again.
Thank you, Chairman. So members, we're on page 60 of the agenda and slide 34 of the presentation, considering an application that relates to an existing Gypsy and Traveller site on Tolney Lane that benefits from a temporary planning permission that expires on the 30th of November this year. As slide 34 shows, it is at the eastern end of Tolney Lane that the site is, and the site is closest to the Great North Road. It's to the east of the Riverside car park. To the north is the railway line, and to the south is the River Trent. And further east are the other Gypsy and Traveller sites along the lane. The site provides 15 pitches and is located within flood zone 3B, which is within the functional floodplain of the river, as is Tolney Lane, the only access in and out of the site. It is within the defined urban area of Newark and in the conservation area. Slide 37 shows the approved site layout. The application seeks planning permission to vary condition 1 to make the permission permanent. The planning history of the site is set out in the report and has been the subject of a number of applications since its original approval in 2014. Members will no doubt be aware that the main considerations in relation to this site relate to flood risk, the significant unmet need of gypsy and traveller pitches, the lack of a 5-year supply, and the lack of any other allocated sites. The agent claims that the last temporary planning permission was granted in 2018 for a 3-year period on the basis that need was then unquantified, and therefore the flood risk was considered to outweigh the unquantified need. The Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment has now identified a need for 169 pitches over the plan period, and the agent therefore considers that this high level of need, now known, should outweigh flood risk concerns and a permanent permission be granted. The agent also considers that an appeal decision in Datchet for a Gypsy and Traveller site, also on land at risk of flooding, is a material consideration. The Town Council objects, as does the Environment Agency, on flood risk policy grounds, that a highly vulnerable use in the highest risk of flood zone 3B should not be permitted, and that's without exception. But it also is in relation to the lack of technical information contained within the flood risk assessment submitted with the 2018 application. And members' attention is drawn to the note on the late items schedule in relation to the comments made by the EA. So the EA sets out within the report the differences between this site of the Datchet application further south and the site that is on here, that we're considering here, and why it would not be appropriate to determine this application in the same way. And this is due to material differences and the absence of detailed flooding information submitted for this site within the flood risk assessment. So members will be aware of the long-term and ongoing difficulties of weighing up the significant unmet need for Gypsy and Traveller pitches within our district that has now been quantified, together with the lack of alternative sites, which results in travellers having to occupy sites on Tony Lane that are at the highest risk of flooding, and often on a temporary permission basis. So the last application in 2018 on this site was on the basis that it would give additional time for the local development framework process to identify and allocate more appropriate and safe sites for these applicants. That process is still being advanced, with public consultation expected this summer, but no alternative deliverable sites are currently available. The extent of the pitch requirement and lack of 5-year land supply are both material planning considerations that weigh heavily in favour of a permanent consent, and robust and justifiable reasons are required to depart from an approval. However, the potential risk to lives and property from flooding continues to form such a reason. And as in line with national planning policy, a highly vulnerable use is not permitted in the functional floodplain. It is not considered that the identified quantum of need tips the balance sufficiently in itself to support a permanent permission. The existing temporary permission still has 7 months to run, and given this, it would allow the applicants to remain on the site for this period, and therefore a recommendation of refusal is presented to members for the reasons set out on page 71 of the agenda. But clearly I would also point out to members that if a further temporary permission was being applied for, it's likely that the council would look officers would look favourably at that proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Julia. Can I formally move approval? Can I formally move refusal as per the officer recommendation?
Seconded, Chairman, in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Gough.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have personally gone down to Tony Lane. I first went down there in 2003, and I have recently gone down there on my bicycle. I have to hit many of the potholes down there, which have never been adopted. I'm supporting the travelling community because they know the risk of their property and their lives for a number of years. I've been in Newark 22 years now, and as far as I remember, there's been 2 floods programs over there. There's been 2 floodings over there since I've been around, so I can remember, and they've always been helped by the council to safeguard their lives, and they've always been put on safe land. So I believe that the travellers know that they'll always be helped by the council. We've got a council that needs to get more properties for the travelling people of Tony Lane. So the only way that will happen is to get approval of other locations for them. So I'm supporting the people that choose to live their life the way they want to. So I'm supporting the application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to make 2 brief points, if I may. Page 69, at the very, very bottom of that page, the very last sentence, I'm slightly disappointed with. No comments were received from the Council's emergency planner. And my second point is, Chairman, if I may, that Zone 3B, and I quote, I looked it up on the government website, just to confirm, this zone comprises land where water has to flow or be stored in times of a flood. I say no more. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Woodhead, and then Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I find this rather strange because we struggle to find gypsy and traveller sites in and around Newark and Sherwood. And here we've got one that the travellers fully know and fully understand all its problems, and still they want to remain there, they want to be there. So how can we say no when we can't find them anywhere else suitable where people will accept the issue? And we've had more than one debate on this item, as far as I'm aware. So I will support the traveller community in their quest.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. The Bower family have lived down Tony Lane for 3 generations, as far as I'm aware. So they are aware of the trials and tribulations of living down Tony Lane. Yes, we have got problems. We have not resolved the land that we've got to find some pitches for. And until we do that, we are constantly going to have this sort of application coming forward. Julia Lockwood herself said quite clearly, had this been for a temporary planning permission, then the recommendation would have been for approval. So I would like to move that we give another temporary planning permission, because for goodness sake, if we don't get ourselves sorted out, I think probably the government might take it out of our hands and do it for us. I don't know, but I have my suspicions, and therefore it will be implemented on us instead of doing the job properly, which is consultation with everybody. So I would like to move that it be a temporary planning permission with the thought that we will resolve where we are going to have these extra pitches placed in our district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and I'll take advice from Pardip or Lisa. The application is for a permanent use. Does that enable us to grant a temporary, even though that is not what the application is for, or do we better invite the applicants, who may very well appeal any refusal we issue this afternoon, to submit a temporary consent separately. Can I seek advice on that, please?
My view, Councillor, is that the proposal is very clear. This is a variation of condition 1 attached to a planning permission to make the temporary permission permanent, and therefore the application is simply for that before members. So in my view, it would not be possible to deal with this application by way of a temporary permission. Lisa, I would welcome your views, whether you concur with that.
I would concur with that because it is contrary to the description. So there'd be that conflict, so therefore it wouldn't be lawful.
Thank you. And Maureen, in asking that question of our legal advisor and of Lisa, I don't disagree with your sentiment and would be very supportive if it was a temporary consent, all other things being equal. But that we have this afternoon to determine approval of a permanent consent or a refusal of a permanent consent. I'll let you come back, Maureen.
Thank you. Well, if that's the case, Chairman, then I will move deferment for conversations with the applicant to see if the applicant is prepared to continue on a temporary basis until we've actually got ourselves organised and allocated some areas. Because we can't keep going on like this, Chairman. It's not fair to the community, and it's not fair to anybody else. Thank you.
No, well, I will remind everybody, of course, that we have perhaps the strongest possible objection from the Environment Agency, as Councillor Skinner has reminded us. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate, obviously, the moment kind of gypsy traveller sites come up and we have the requirement and it gets a bit more complicated. But I mean, for me, this is very clear. We have the Environment Agency coming in with a very firm comment saying no. So for me, kind of background aside, it's black and white. In response to Councillor Dobson's, the government may come in and take it off. Absolutely, I could see that happening. But if that were to happen, based on the Environment Agency's recommendation, they wouldn't choose this site to implement that on, in my view.
Thank you. Yes, I concur with that. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do agree with Councillor Matt Skinner. There is one thing that we do know about Tony Lane, and that is that travellers prefer to be there. And on that reason alone, I must agree with Mrs. Dobson, Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
Thank you. As all members are aware, there are discussions about action that could be taken to improve the protection of Tolney Lane, and I'm not prejudging the outcome of those discussions. What we have to judge this afternoon is the specific application we have before us, with a very clear recommendation of refusal based upon the Environment Agency's response. Nobody else. Helen, over to you, please.
Oh. Okay. Councillor Blaney.
For refusal.
Councillor Brazier.
Against.
For refusal. Councillor Brock.
For.
Councillor Crowe.
Sorry, Rob.
Sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry. With great reluctance, for.
Councillor Mrs. Dales.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
I think that was mouthing against, Maureen. Am I right? Because you were muted.
Apologies, my apologies. Against refusal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gough.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Holloway.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Saddington.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Ivor Walker. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Councillor Ivor.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Keith Walker.
Against.
And Councillor Mrs Woodhead.
Against.
So that's 8 for and 7 against.
Okay, so that is refused. We therefore move in accordance with the officer recommendation. We therefore move on to agenda item 8, erection of 87 dwellings, Bowbridge Road. This is one that I believe is being presented by Lisa.
It is, thank you, Chairman. So the report starts at page 74 and the slides at slide number 38. So the 87 dwellings are proposed and all of them are proposed to be affordable housing. You'll note from the report that the site is an allocated site in the local plan, with the anticipation that this development will come on board, or one similar, of course, towards the latter part of the plan period. And you'll note within the allocation, it was anticipated there'd be around 66 dwellings, but that was also in the context of the nursing home that was granted planning permission on appeal back in 2012, and that is set out on page 75 of the agenda. So you will see on your slides, and if I can refer you specifically to flick through 44 to 50, you will see that there is a variety of house styles. Overall, there's 14 different house types, and they comprise flats, bungalows and houses. So it does give a good variety to future occupiers of the area. So in terms of the overall design of the scheme, officers are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable. There is the objection from Newark Town Council, and their details are set out on page 79. And you'll notice from the slides that this site is surrounded both from the highway, being Bowbridge Road, but industrial areas with tarmac, etc., to the other 3 surrounding areas. No consultees have objected to the proposal, subject to planning conditions and/or planning obligations to mitigate the impact of the development. One resident has objected to the proposal, and their details are set out on page 82. So, as I've said, the mix is broadly in accordance with our policy, and that is set out on pages 83 to 84. So whilst the proposal doesn't put forward any 4-bed units, one would anticipate, because this is by NCHA, which provide affordable housing, they are providing houses that they know that the community needs in this area. All issues have been sorted in terms of the amenity of the site, so that there is open space to the northwest. There's a range of garden sizes to the properties, so there's some which are slightly larger for those who prefer gardening. However, one of the key issues on this site is in relation to noise, and the discussion of that is set out at pages 87 to 91 of the report. Referring back to when the site was allocated, it was allocated back in 2013, and it was anticipated it would be part of the latter review of the plan that it would come forwards. So when it was allocated, it was under the previous core strategy, and the timescales for that were 2006 to 2026. So it could be argued from the applicant's point of view that being in 2021, we are towards the latter part of the plan period, as was the case back then. You will note that the report highlights that there's been various iterations to the proposal, and this all relates to the noise considerations. And if I can just direct you away from slide 44, because that is one of the previous layouts that were submitted. So that one isn't proposed. It is the layout shown on slide 43 that is the layout that is being considered.
Chairman, I'm leaving the meeting now.
Yvonne, thank you very much for your attendance. You did give prior notice of an important engagement elsewhere, and thank you for your presence this afternoon.
Okay. So you will note from the report in relation to noise that there's what I would call the 3 hotspots. So what the applicant has done is to provide mitigation to the flats in the terms of acoustic fencing, and they're located to the northeast of the site. There's the flatted block that wraps around the southeast corner, and from the photographs, again within the report, you'll see that all the habitable rooms are located to the front, i.e. away from the noise source, to mitigate the impact. The other area of noise is where the open space is located. So it's not the most ideal place for people to sit and relax, but they have designed it bearing in mind all of the constraints that are associated with the site. And you'll note in the report that acoustic windows will be provided, which will ensure that appropriate noise levels are available within each of the properties. Highways have responded that they don't have objections, notwithstanding that's one of the objections from Newark Town Council. The report indicates that the junction capacity at Bowbridge Road, Bowbridge Lane and also at Horton Lane is acceptable with this development coming on board and taking account the previous developments such as Arkwood, the appeal that's under consideration at Flowserve and the dwellings at land south of along the Southern Link Road. So overall, it's a very constrained site and it's quite challenging because of the environmental constraints around it. However, it is considered that it is acceptable, subject to the conditions set out in the report at pages 100 to 107, and subject to the Section 106 requirements and conditions therein. So subject to that, recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Formally move approval in accordance with the officer recommendation.
Seconded in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And members will have noted on page 99 that whilst this is a policy compliance scheme, the applicants have indicated if it is refused that they may not be able to sustain those developer contributions. I deprecate that written statement from the applicants, and I would urge this committee not that should have no bearing whatsoever on their decision this afternoon. We should be looking at the planning merits of this, not whether we are going to receive, in response to the impact of the scheme, developer contributions, or whether if it is allowed on appeal following a refusal, the applicants may not be making that available. So we consider it on his planning merits and purely on his planning merits. Councillor Crowe and then Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, Chairman, I thought ward members come first. Sorry.
I do apologise. I can never remember where the boundary is between your two wards. It's a lot easier in the rural area when it's villages. Councillor Skinner, followed by Councillor Crowe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is the second application in my ward within a couple of 100 yards for a significant development within 12 months, as we've heard. We've already got the Arkwood development, which is swimmingly going ahead. My observations on this, Chairman, are as follows. I like the design. I think the road layout, I think the property styles are incredibly attractive. I think it's going to bring those much needed development, different types of properties in terms of the number of bedrooms within them. I like the way that the properties that are facing the Bowbridge Road, outward looking, would be viewed upon. My only comment on this, Chairman, is that I'm slightly disappointed that the Highways Authority haven't raised any concerns, because I do take seriously in terms of what the Town Council said in terms of that cumulative impact. We have got a number of schemes now. We know Bowbridge Road is an incredibly narrow and fragile road. And if anything, I hope if this application is successful this afternoon, this can further our argument and success in delivering the Southern Link Road, because I really believe that will help matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Skinner, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Crowe.
Actually, Chairman, Councillor Skinner said most of what I want to say, but I am a little perturbed about the noise pollution that could happen towards the end, especially where it backs onto tarmac. But again, Lisa did point out that they were having acoustic fencing, etc., etc. So I'm quite happy with what has been said there. But yes, I do agree with what Councillor Skinner has said.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gough.
Sorry, as you can know, I am a cyclist, so I do go around quite heartily in some of these small roads. I am concerned about noise and pollution and that sort of thing around in these areas. It would be nice to have a 30 miles radius in some of these streets, because some streets are racing up and down, as you know, and we need to try and reduce some of these cars that are racing down some of our narrow streets to safeguard some of the residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Chairman. Sorry, just if I may come in there, Chairman. I'm a little concerned that Councillor Gough may have inadvertently misled committee there, but I think I'm right in saying Burbridge Road is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit road.
Well, they don't have a sign. They don't have signs.
And I wouldn't,
Councillor Gough, I'll let you come back.
Committee be misled. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, some people tell me they don't have signs, like in Farndon Road and Horton Road. There's no 30-mile signs to let people know they can keep to the speed limit, Mr. Chairman. That's what I'm.
But you're talking about repeater signs, which are not needed in the 30-mile limit. So forgive me, Councillor Gough, we are moving on. The point has been made. Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know why we even allocated this site. Well, I do, but it didn't work out. Had it worked out how we wanted it to work out, it would have been a good site. I have to first of all congratulate Nottingham Housing Association on their development next to the hospital. It looks good.
Yes.
I'm really pleased with it. There was one or two people that were hesitant, but now it's virtually complete. They've made a really good job of it. But I am concerned that we are doing a large development next to a tarmac concrete plant where we're going to have dust and fumes. And it's really, I know they've got mitigation for noise, but they haven't got mitigation for what's going into people's chests, into their lungs. We've got an open space there, but nobody's going to be able to sit in it because tarmac are going to be doing their concrete batching. And while I don't want to say turn it down, I do honestly think I would like to prefer to try and help Nottingham Housing Association find a different piece of land. This is just not suitable with all what's surrounding it for any more development. I think we're building houses or putting houses in areas sometimes that are not suitable for the well-being of the community.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Councillor Mrs. Holloway, followed by Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to make the very same comments that Councillor Dobson's made. I'm really concerned about the air quality, the pollution. I noticed that the air quality assessment's been more to do with the quality of air during this development rather than the quality of air as it currently stands. Pollution, as we know, is a major risk now to health and has been stated as such. I also am concerned about the noise aspect of people trying to enjoy open space with that level of noise, and whether those noise assessments have been made at a time when full workings have been actually been carried out, because it's all been during the pandemic when working has been reduced. I'm just feeling very concerned about that aspect of it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Yes, thank you. Yes, like the two speakers just before me, I have grave concerns about particularly the air quality here, and the noise assessment. In my experience, acoustic fences don't improve an awful lot. I don't know whether the one I've had experience with hasn't been done correctly. But you know, looking at the site, I find it hard to believe that it was actually an allocated site, unless that whole area can come forward as residential. I mean, you know, you've got tarmac. Tufnell Parcels, I think, have pulled out of there now, so I don't know who's going to go in there. You know, I ask myself, would I like to live there? And my concerns are the noise and the air quality and the effect it will have on health and health safety. And like Mrs. Dobson, if we can work with them and find an alternative site, I think that would be a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Although, of course, it will still remain a site allocated for housing development. Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Chair. I think every best effort has been made on this application. In fact, I commend the work done on it. But there are so many constraints here in my mind, and they have been mentioned. And would I wish to live here? No. And I don't think I'd wish that on others either. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, that's everybody who's indicated they wish to speak. Let's go to the vote therefore. Helen, please.
Okay. Councillor Blaney.
For.
Councillor Brazier.
Very reluctantly against.
Councillor Brock.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Dales.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
You're mute, but I think that was against.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute. I do apologise. Against, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gough.
Very much against for the speeding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Mrs. Holloway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Saddington.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
For.
Councillor Keith Walker.
Against.
So that's 9 against and 5 for.
Right, so therefore the proposition of approval put forward has been lost. Can I therefore have another proposition, please?
Yes, I'll move that the application be refused on ground of unsuitability for the type of for residential development, even though it's allocated.
I think the advice we've been given by Pardip, and I'll invite her to come in. Bear with me, Maureen.
Okay.
Is that given that this council has allocated this site for residential, to refuse an application on the basis that effectively, as you were saying there, it's not suitable for residential, is one that would be lost at appeal. I can't see any way it would be anything other. Am I right on that assessment, Pardip?
Yes, Councillor, you are, because clearly the starting point for any development is to ensure that the development complies with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And clearly, this site has been allocated for housing in our plan. So it's very difficult to say that the site is actually, unsuitable for housing. It is a very difficult one, but clearly robust reasons now need to be produced to ensure that this matter can be defended at appeal.
So, given what has been said during the debate, and there have been concerns on grounds of noise, on grounds of dust, if you like, would it be, if there is to be a proposal of refusal, would the grounds of refusal be one that the particular development is not one which addresses the concerns given the surrounding industrial uses of noise and dust pollution. I'm not sure what else, having listened to the debate, could possibly be put forward as a ground for refusal. I'll seek advice, Lisa, from yourself, and perhaps other members may have a view as to what would be defensible, or at the very least, partially defensible grounds for refusal.
Yeah, I mean, this is an incredibly challenging site in itself. We've obviously got the comments from Environmental Health, both on noise and dust. Within their dust comments, which is set out on page 80, they've definitely considered the employment context. So if members were to go contrary to that, it'd be contrary to our technical officers. And so we would have to defend it without that technical expertise behind us. So that is where I'm very concerned. And it is an allocated site, as Pardip and yourself have set out. But from the comments so far, it does seem to focus around that. So it would depend whether we could get the technical experts to defend that position.
Okay, now I've had a flurry of people putting their hands up. We have no proposition in front of us at present, so I'll take them in order. I've got them on my screen. Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Sorry, Chairman, I think mine was an old hand, but could we not cite the recent court case in where a young girl's death was found to be from air pollution?
Yeah.
You know, it is within an industrial area. There's concrete works, and there's a parcel company there supposedly, and other industry.
Chair, the only thing I would reiterate is the advice that Lisa has clearly given. Clearly air pollution is very challenging at the moment, and it is certainly of much concern. But at the end of the day, at appeal, what will be required is hard evidence. And clearly that hard evidence has to be provided, not by the lawyers, not by the planning officers, but by our experts. We will need an environmental health officer to categorically say that housing development on this particular site will cause harm and a risk to life of the residents who live there. And as I said, it's very challenging, it's very difficult, and I'm sure, and I do fully understand, why members are considering as to why, the allocation was actually in the plan for residential in the first place. But I just think that we need a discussion on producing some robust and strong reasons.
Okay, I've got 4 other people. Is anybody saying anything other that they believe pollution, air pollution and noise are factors? Because otherwise we're just going to go round in circles. Is there anybody wanting to say something different to that, please?
Well, Mr. Chairman,
yes, Chairman.
Councillor Gough first.
Well, I still have to go on the speeding.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Gough. This is a 30-mile-an-hour limit zone. And that is not a relevant planning matter which could in any way at all support approval or refusal of this application. Councillor Mrs. Dobson, anything other than...
Chairman, can we just not for once say we've made a mistake for allocating that area because we thought it was going to be part of the activity village. We thought it was all going to disappear.
No. It was never, with respect, it was never going to be part of the activity village.
Why can't we accept that we've dropped to clanger? Because I am not prepared to vote for housing in an area that is harmful to people. Thank you.
Well, again, I think if this was to go to appeal, and NCHA have indicated they would, for us to say at appeal we made a mistake 8-9 years ago, I think, and it was never to be part of the activity village, I think would ensure that the appeal was allowed. I'm just wondering, as we are, as I say, going in circles, yes, Vice Chairman.
It is an allocated site, and we are going round and round and finding difficulty in putting a good argument against it. But could we not then, as a move forward, to defer until the next meeting, when by then, hopefully, we will have had time to have gone on to a site meeting and have a look at the site itself to see. Other than that, we're going to go round and round.
Lisa Pardip? Pardip, yes.
Yeah, Chair, I was going to say that given the stronger concerns that members do have, it might make sense for a deferral to give consideration to the concerns that have been raised. We could talk to our environmental health people. Could they listen to some of the concerns that have been raised? Is there anything that they could actually assist with, providing any, reasons for refusal? So on the face of it, a deferral would certainly allow time to convey these concerns to our environmental health experts, and then we can bring a report back saying, well, those concerns have been considered and here is the further information. I'm not sure whether that's going to help.
No, I think that does very much, and therefore, Vice Chairman, can I invite you to put that as a formal proposal?
Yes, sir. Certainly, Chairman.
So that's deferral for further examination and consideration of the recommendation, of the information on noise and dust pollution that we have before us. I'll formally second that. Councillor Mrs. Saddington, that has now been moved and seconded for deferral. Did you want to say anything?
Well, I've had my hand up actually for about 4 minutes.
Well, you may have done, but what's the point you wish to make?
Well, the point I wish to make was something that was said, which that this site was allocated 8 or 9 years ago, and we have moved on with fresh air, health, ash, whatever. And in the light of the girl who's recently died from...
Forgive me, we have covered this point. This has already been covered.
Surely this has to be a point, and a major point.
Well, it may be a point that comes in the report that comes back to us at the next meeting if we defer it to this afternoon. But, you rightly raised that point, but it is a point that's already been made. So can we go to a vote on deferral, please, Helen?
Yes, Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4 deferral.
Councillor Brock.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Dales.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
4 deferral.
Councillor Gough.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Saddington.
4 deferral.
Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 9 is Southwell Racecourse. I did indicate prior to the meeting that I would propose an adjournment at or close to 4 o'clock for 5 minutes. It is 15:53, 7 minutes to 4. Can I therefore propose that we do have an adjournment just until 4 o'clock, and we will restart at 4 o'clock on the dot? Is everybody content with that? Okay, thank you. So we will suspend the streaming. Is that right, Alexander? So we'll be suspending streaming and therefore we will rejoin at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. committee has reconvened, and we now move on to agenda item 9, which is an application at Southwell Racecourse, Rolleston. This is one, I think, Lisa, Julia, is being presented by your good self.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're now on page 109 of the agenda, members, and turn to slide 51 of the presentation. And we're considering an application at Southwell Racecourse to replace the existing racing surface material of the racecourse track itself, which is an area of approximately 42,000 square metres. So the site sits between the villages of Rolleston to the east, Fiskerton to the south, Upton to the north, and Southwell to the west. The River Greet runs to the north of the site and is linked to various dikes, including Greenfield Drain and Beck Dyke to the south of the site. As a result, the site's within flood zones 2 and 3 of the Environment Agency flood maps. There's a local wildlife site within the semicircle outlined by the track, and public rights of way sit to the western and northern boundaries. There are some heritage assets approximately 200 metres to the east. 80 races are allowed to operate on the site each year, along with a maximum of 12 Sunday races per annum. This is an existing commercial and tourism enterprise, and it is a considerable contributor to the local economy. So full planning permission is sought to replace the existing fibre sand racing surface with a modern day equivalent known as Tapeta 12. This is a microfibre reinforced material. The works also include a change to the upper subsurface arrangement, replacing an existing impermeable membrane with a porous macadam layer, that is basically crushed aggregate, in addition to the replacement surface itself. This is a microfibre reinforced material with a binder comprising a blend of silica, sand, wax and fibres. It's an artificial all-weather racing surface which can cope better with low temperatures, significant rainfall, and it brings the surface up to modern standards, allowing for greater diversity in the racing programme, but within the existing operational restrictions. So the proposal would not alter the existing associated drainage system. It would not alter ground levels. It wouldn't alter the track's location or its overall appearance. Slide 56 gives a proposed cross-section through the proposed surface, and at the bottom you'll notice that there are existing lateral drains set into the ground that will remain undisturbed. A significant consideration within this application is the logistics of the movement of significant levels of material to and from the site. The report calculates the operation to comprise approximately 2,000 total HGV movements over a 10 to 12 week construction period. And this would include bringing material into the site and taking material away from the site. Due to the proposed reuse of this existing material, it is proposed to store the fibre sand from the existing surface track on a site adjacent to it until it's disposed of to other racecourse sites on the local golf course. As such, the removal of this material from the site is likely to take place within a longer time period than the 10 to 12 week construction time. On page 118 of the agenda is an aerial photograph showing the land outlined in yellow dots where the fibre sand is proposed to be temporarily stored. This area is shown also shaded in purple on slide 55 of the presentation. This area is already used for the storage of some microsand to replenish the existing racetrack as and when it's required. But clearly the volume stored here would be markedly increased by the proposals for a limited time. To ensure that the old microfiber sand is removed from the site within a reasonable time frame, as set out within the late items schedule, it is proposed to amend condition 9 to require that all fibre sand be removed from that site within 6 months of the commencement of the development. The applicant would prefer this to be extended to 12 months to allow more flexibility, but at the moment, the condition before members' consideration is for a 6-month period. As well as seeking additional details, this condition will require a material disposal programme to be submitted and approved, which again gives us additional controls over movement of material following the construction period of old material away from the site. So it's proposed that deliveries to and from the site would take place between 8:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the afternoon, 6 days a week, which could be conditioned and is conditioned within the report. An HGV travel plan has been submitted, which shows that vehicles would enter the site via Occupation Lane, avoiding the level crossing, and exit down Racecourse Road. Slide 57 shows a signage scheme being introduced at 6 points along these routes to direct HGVs along the correct route and warn pedestrians of construction traffic. Slide 58 shows the wider travel plan, which includes a route from the A1 Winthorpe Junction along the A46 and then through the villages of Kelham, Aram, Upton and the eastern edge of Southwell. Members will be aware from the report before them that a considerable level of local opposition to the proposals from both the host parish council at Rolleston and all surrounding parish councils, as well as 35 letters of objection from local residents and third parties. I'll consider all these views summarised in the report as read, members. In terms of consultees, neither the Environment Agency, the lead local flood authority or the Internal Drainage Board object to the scheme on flood risk grounds. As existing drainage facilities remain, as existing and infiltration characteristics of tapeta are comparable with the existing fibre sand surface, but that permeability would be improved to prevent waterlogging on the surface. But it would have a slower percolation rate, which would reduce marginally a slower release of surface water disposal from the site, representing a betterment. Concerns have also been raised regarding potential implications of water quality from the new surface. However, as set out in full in the report, the existing drainage infrastructure is a closed system with adequate safeguards in place concerning protection from contaminants, etc., which are not to be altered. The EA is satisfied that any risk of pollution from the new track would be low and could result in an improvement on the current material in situ. In ecology terms, concerns were raised by third parties and parish councils that the presence of polyethylene coating within the tapeta surface, and this would cause a threat to local water habitats. The applicant, in response, has amended the proposal to use tapeta 12 instead of tapeta 10, which contains no polyethylene. Ecological appraisals and tests have been submitted, confirming that tapeta 12 is stable, it does not break down, it's not toxic, and it would not or cause any harm to aquatic life or any other flora or fauna. No objection has been raised by any technical experts on these ecological matters. So impacts on flood risk, water quality and ecology are therefore considered to be acceptable. Network Rail, Rights of Way Officer and the Highway Authority also raised no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions relating to the compliance with the travel plan, installation of temporary signage, and a recording procedure of road surfaces before and after construction to assess damages to the road of Fiskerton Road, Occupation Lane and Racecourse Road in accordance with Condition 8 before members. The Highway Authority can then secure an undertaking with the applicant to repair any damage that has occurred as a result of the works. Based on traffic associated with the implementation being for a finite period, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in highway safety terms, and the proposed wider route to and from the site is considered to be the most appropriate to serve the development. No harms have been identified on the character and appearance of the surrounding countryside, the setting of heritage assets, or residential amenity impacts. So subject to the conditions set out on pages 125 to 126 of the agenda, but as amended by the late items schedule and reported verbally to members, a recommendation of approval is presented to members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Julia. Now, we had been notified that Lisa Jane Campbell, as clerk to Upton Parish Council, had requested to speak. I don't believe she is with us this afternoon. I can't see, and I'm sure she or Helen will shout at me if I am wrong on that. So I will therefore move formally to recommendation of approval in accordance with the officer recommendation.
Seconded, Chairman, in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And as Councillor Skinner reminded me on the previous application, ward members come first, and this happens to be within my ward, so let me kick off. And I'm very mindful of the fact, as is set out on in the report on page 112, that 4 of my 5 parish councils have objected to this application. I was perhaps surprised when I saw the application had been lodged, because to my knowledge, the previous fibre sand material had been removed and replaced on the racecourse on 2 separate occasions without any planning application being required, without any routing proposals for the HGVs involved. And the reason for that was that prior to the flood alleviation works that were authorised by the Environment Agency and I think this council for Southwell Racecourse, it had been submerged under flood water for a period of time, and the fibre sand material, when it is submerged in that way, congeals and makes it difficult, if not impossible, for horses to run on it safely. And that did not excite the concerns that were excited once this application before us this afternoon was lodged. And I shared those concerns initially because there was a lot of information, perhaps misinformation and misunderstanding about Tapeta 12, the material, or Tapeta 10, I should say, the material involved, and also about the number of HGV movements that might be involved. So my assessment of this was that there were 3 issues that needed to be addressed. The first was the routing of the HGVs that were going to be involved. I'll come back on that. The second is the safety of Tapeta, the Tapeta material, should it leach into the groundwater or into the water courses. And the third, which is very much a concern of the parishioners and the parish council at Rolleston, as the only community downstream of Southwell Racecourse, was whether there were going to be any increased flood risk as a result of these works. And I'm grateful to County Councillor in that case, Mrs. Saddington, whose division this site falls in, for pressing county highways and county council as the lead flood authority to look very closely at both those concerns. Now, the highways concern from my perspective was that coming away from the racecourse down Occupation Lane, which runs parallel to the existing railway line, comes to a junction at Fiskerton Station, where any exiting of HGVs there would be a serious, this number of HGVs, a serious safety hazard, especially if they were to turn left over the immediate level crossing and exit via Fiskerton. That's not to protect Fiskerton, but it's to protect the safety of people on that crossing from such a number of HGVs. And I'm grateful to the applicants and to Notts Highways for coming up with a traffic routing scheme which has vehicles coming into Occupation Lane carrying the material and leaving by the racecourse company's own racecourse road up to the A612. And that applies both on vehicles bringing the material in and, in due course, vehicles taking material out. So far as the composition was concerned, that was a very real issue, and the polyethylene, which has been mentioned, which is contained, as I understand it, within Tapeta 10, the latest iteration of Tapeta 12 does not contain it, and we can see that neither Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board nor the Environment Agency have a concern. And indeed, the Environment Agency, in their response, they have had several of their specialist teams look at this, and all have concluded that the material is safe, and this application is one that doesn't raise any objection from them. And the Environment Agency also have considered very carefully the issue of additional flood risk, especially to the village of Rolleston, and they have come to a positive conclusion on this application and raised no objection to it, nor does Nottinghamshire County Council as a lead flood authority. So I think what was initially considered a very straightforward application to replace material, which had, as I say, happened twice before without a planning application being necessary, has been looked at extremely carefully. And on that basis, I certainly am now satisfied that this can proceed. The concern voiced by Upton, and I'm conscious that their clerk has not been able to join us this afternoon, was one in terms of the number of vehicle movements. As has been mentioned, the figure of 2,000 in the report is a figure that involves the material coming in and the material going out. And the material going out will be over an extended period. The material coming in will be approximately 1,000 lorry movements. But over an 8-hour period, 5 days a week, and I'm conscious the proposal is for longer than 5 days, a Saturday as well, but over 8 hours, 5 days, 10 weeks, that's 400 hours, 1,000 lorry movements in 400 hours is between 2 and 3 an hour, which I don't believe is a meaningful increase in the vehicle movement through Upton, and certainly, as has been pointed out, for a very short period. So I would allay the fears of the residents there that, as was said at their parish council, they wouldn't be able to come out of their front doors or walk safely along the street. The final thing is the question of the length of period that the applicants would want to remove the material. I believe that the 6-month period is the right one. Members will have seen on page 122 there are concerns about the alleged unauthorised groundworks in the flood zone, and these are being investigated by our planning enforcement team. Now, those concerns suggest that there has been additional flooding of neighbouring land. And I don't personally think the storage of this material will add to it, but I think it is right that we wait until the planning enforcement team conclude their examination, if you like, of those concerns. So the proposal for 6 months after the commencement of the development is sufficient time to enable that to happen. It may not be sufficient time for the applicants to remove all the material, given it's going, as I understand it, to go to several locations. But what that would mean is once the enforcement have concluded their examination, any extension of time could be dealt with by a simple Section 73 application. So on that basis, I've not only moved approval formally, I am supporting approval with one minor amendment. One of the requests made by Upton Parish Council was perhaps for a bit of relief, not just on Sunday, but on a Saturday afternoon. So I don't think it is unreasonable to reduce the hours of operation on a Saturday from what is proposed before us to between 8:30 in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'll propose that as a slight amendment to the recommendation before us. And with that, as ward member, I'll be quiet and hand over to Councillor Mrs. Saddington, who I know has been particularly involved in consideration of this application. Sue?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for letting me speak really as to what has happened at the County Council. This application seems to have been on my desk and phone calls seem to have been going backwards and forwards for months because, as you rightly say, when it first came to notice, it just sounded horrendous. But I have worked with County Council and I must pay thanks to them and to the officers at Newark and Sherwood District Council, who I've also been speaking to, because everybody has done everything they can to get it to the point that we see it at today. I have managed to get the temporary signage so that we don't have lorries nipping through the rural villages. The photographic survey to check on the condition of the roads will be an advantage, of course, so that they have to leave the roads in the condition that they find them. We have got the one-way system down Occupation Lane, although I do worry a little bit because when this was looked at, people were at home, working from home. And of course, we're going to find now that people are going back to work more and more. That means they'll be using the station more at Fiskerton. And because of the lack of car parking, they will be parking their cars on Occupation Lane. And I think Councillor Blaney and whoever is representing the County Council will find that more times than enough, little wing mirrors are getting knocked off by the big lorries turning in. However, that's for the future. The one thing that I do have a concern about is that it does say in our papers in the report that the drainage has been improved recently. I am still given information that in actual fact their drainage is not as good as it should be, and the water goes onto the golf course, which is further away, and it is not within their ownership. So I do worry about that. And the Tapeta 12, although it doesn't sound as dangerous to the watercourses, I have actually asked for technical data on that, and Nottinghamshire County Council haven't been able to obtain the technical report. And I've never known an application where so many parish councils object, and it does worry me that I haven't had that technical report on that fairly new surface. It's being used, I understand, by other racecourses. And I would have thought, like anything that we buy where you can find reviews, there would have been a review on this particular surface. And that I haven't been able to obtain, and I just wonder why. It does worry me about the flooding because I was only in Ralston recently.
Councillor Saddington talk.
Pardon?
Somebody.
Sorry.
Sorry.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
I have no difficulty, Maureen. So, and I can see others saying that they're okay. So, please, Sue, carry on.
So, Ralston have had flooding problems recently, as has Fiskerton. I've been out with them. And not too long ago, I was out on Christmas Day in Ralston when they had flooding issues. There has been work done to a flood bank, but I just worry that because I couldn't get the technical data from this company who produced this new surface, to me, I question why. But I will leave that to other members to consider. I certainly think should this be acceptable to members, 6 months is long enough to store that material that they're taking off, because who knows whether it will increase any flooding sitting on a field that would normally be able to accept water. So I think that is important, and I just hope that if this is acceptable today, we're not seeing residents flooded and houses flooded, as I've seen before in Ralston, where up to the dining room chairs people have been wading out of water. And, you know, these areas, Ralston and Southwell, do flood, and I do have a worry about it, partly because we haven't got the technical information, which I did ask over and over again for and was told they couldn't get it. And I just wonder why not. But I shall listen to the conversation with others, and I shall make my decision when it comes to the final decision that people are making. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Saddington, thank you very much. I have to say there is a substantial amount of technical data readily available on the website about Tapeta, and I do note on page 113 that the biodiversity and geomorphology team at the Environment Agency have assessed the risk of pollution and say that the risk is low, and based on the testing data, the use of a wax coating will further reduce any pollution risk. So I do think the Environment Agency have had access to the data that perhaps Notts County Council have struggled to find. Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Chair. We have moved forward on this application. A large number of people were very fearful of this a relatively short time ago, and I commend the large number of colleagues who worked on this, have presented a lot of technical expertise, and I think we are in a position now to make a more measured judgment. I'd like to focus the committee on two key facts here. First of all, please do bear in mind, this is part of the functional flood plain. Floodplains do flood. We need to take that on board. And secondly, as already been mentioned, the actual area of the racing surface is 42,000 square meters. That's big. We need to get this right. I think the three critical issues here in my mind have been mentioned by both my colleagues: runoff, pollution, and logistics. Tapeta 12, I understand, is significantly better than Tapeta 10. That's an advance. And I understand that material has been used at the Newcastle racecourse. And I quote to you the conclusion of the Environmental Agency regarding pollution here. It is this: the drainage system shows no significant discharge of suspended solids or dissolved hydrocarbons. No significant discharge. In my mind, looking at that conclusion, there remain concerns about pollution. They've not gone away, they're evident, and in fact, the Environment Agency go on to say, if this is employed, then it should be monitored henceforth. I applaud that, but clearly in their minds, there is a concern. I'm also concerned about the possibility of flooding. I don't pretend to share the technical expertise of the Environmental Agency, but basically the old surface was sand in essence. Sand is pretty porous. I still have concerns about the potential for runoff here and the aggravation of flooding in an area whereby concerns have been raised quite rightly in the past. And thirdly, the issue of logistics. We're talking about the movement of very appreciable quantities of materials here. I don't have any shortcuts. And again, I commend the work which has been done on the routing, etc., and things have improved there. But 1,500 vehicles, 2,000 vehicles, 3, 4, 5, 6 vehicles a day. We can debate till the cows come home, which is the accurate number. But certainly, let's be assured, the movement of those vehicles over, what, 10, 12 weeks is not going to enhance the quality of life of people living in these villages. Those vehicles are going to be moving in fairly narrow roads and lanes, already congested, already in a sad state of repair. And I hear claims that once all this has been done and dusted, matters will be remedied. I hesitate there. I just wonder how long that remediation process might take. So colleagues, in a nutshell, things do look far better here than they did 2-3 months ago, but there's still a lot of concern. And the concerns, I think, rest on the 3 dimensions I've mentioned: pollution, drainage, and logistics. I still have reservations about this, and that is why I shall abstain when it comes to voting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mrs. Rainbow.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm going to support this application. I thank Mrs. Lockwood for her comprehensive report, and I think it shows the willingness of the applicant to work with the authority. Indeed, you know, a lot has been achieved with the traffic management plan. Southall Racecourse is of national significance, and it is we all benefit economically from this. You know, the knock-on effect to the surrounding areas from visitors who possibly come into Southwell, spend money in our shops and cafes, etc. It is sort of a, you know, reciprocal arrangement, really. They go there, they come here, they come here, they go there. So I'm happy to support it on that. And really, all they're trying to do is improve the surface of the racecourse to make it safer for the horses and the riders. And I think that is you know, a good thing. And I wholeheartedly support this application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So on that basis, we go to the vote, Helen, and this is recommendation of approval with the alteration to the one of the conditions as set out in the late representations, and with the suggested amendment that I've tabled, that the lorry movements on a Saturday are limited from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Over to you, Helen.
Okay. Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4.
Councillor Brock.
Abstain.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Dales.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Dobson.
4.
Councillor Gough.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
I think I'm going to abstain on this one because of the reason I gave about the assessment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
And Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
So that's 12 for and 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much indeed. That is therefore approved as amended. We now move on to agenda item 10, Seven Hills Temporary Accommodation. This is before us because it's an application from Newark and Sherwood District Council and there are no objections otherwise. So I'll hand this across. Lisa, I think this is your good self.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, so the proposal is an outline application seeking to demolish all the existing buildings and to replace with 20 temporary accommodation units, a communal building, and access will also be relocated within the site. As Councillor Blaney has just said, the application is presented solely because it is a council application. The report starts at page 130 and the slide starts at slide number 59. As an outline application, the only matter being considered as part of this proposal is the access to the site. You'll note the highways have responded and they are happy with the proposal. All matters have been considered as part of the application. Whilst this is allocated for residential development, it's not considered that this use, whilst not a residential per se, is compatible with the overall allocation. So it is a departure, but officers consider that it is acceptable and it is only part of the allocated site as well. You will note within the recommendation in addressing the issue regarding protected species that a nocturnal bat survey is required. I will take any questions that members might have. Other than that, it is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out at pages 141 to 146, subject to receiving the information regarding the nocturnal bat survey as set out on page 141. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Formally move approval in accordance with the officer recommendation, Vice Chairman.
Seconded in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Right, now I think I've got legacy hands from Councillor Mrs Saddington and Mrs Rainbow in respect to the previous application, but I do have a request from Councillor Gough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm wholeheartedly supporting this application. As you know, we've got a lot of people in our district depend on temporary accommodation, so I welcome this application wholeheartedly, and it'd be good for the people that need a place to live. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Just to say, Chairman, I hope it's going to be in better condition, better quality than that was there before, please. That's what I would request. I'm delighted that it's been bulldozed down and it's going to be rebuilt, but let's have a bit of quality down there, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, if one looks at the proposal itself, the detail, so that is unquestionably going to be the case. Right, nobody else is indicating they wish to speak. We go straight to the vote, therefore.
Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4.
Councillor Brock.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Mrs Dales.
4.
Councillor Mrs Dobson.
4.
Councillor Gough.
4.
Councillor Mrs Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
4.
Councillor Skinner.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
And Councillor Keith Walker. Councillor Keith Walker.
Is still muted.
You can hear me now.
Oh,
yes, we can, Keith.
Good. 4.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. We therefore move on to agenda item 11, a community and activity village, Lord Hawke Way, Newark. Julia.
Thank you, Chairman. We're now on page 148 of the agenda, members, and slide 66 of the presentation. Considering an application to make variations to the development by the YMCA for the community and activity village on Lord Hawke Way in Newark. So the only reason the application is before you is because part of the application site forms part of land under the control of the District Council. So this is a substantial site that sits east of Newark Leisure Centre, where planning permission has already been approved for community facilities associated with the YMCA for both indoor and outdoor facilities. Works have commenced on the site, including the approved athletics track and football pitches, and a car park area immediately adjacent to the leisure centre. So slide 70 shows the currently approved site layout, and slide 71 shows the proposed amendments sought by this application. And the main changes comprise revision to the car park arrangements, insertion of a revolving door at the main entrance, and creation of an external gym area adjacent to the north elevation of the building. No objections have been received from any consultees, although there was some concern from the tree officer regarding the limited size of planting. It will result in some additional loss of hedgerow to the western boundary of the site. However, new hedgerow planting is to be provided as part of a comprehensive landscape scheme to compensate for loss of hedgerow, and therefore on this basis officers are happy to recommend approval for this application, subject to the conditions set out on pages 154 to 159 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Julia. Formally move approval in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Seconded in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Right, Councillor Skinner, is this in your ward?
I'm pleased to say it is, Chairman.
Well, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. My only observation is that I've looked at the plans for this. So I'm looking at slide 70 that's before us. And I'm trying to locate the 2 coach bays, because from memory, I thought they were serviced from just the north of the building. And as you can appreciate, if a coach is going through the leisure centre car park, then turning right, and it's one of those larger, I don't know, 50, 60 people on the coach, long ones, I'm concerned how that's going to manoeuvre in the car park. That's my only observation, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know, Julia, if you can help us.
Yes, so the 2 new coach spaces, it is very difficult to see because the plan is so small, but it's basically adjacent to the western boundary of the site. You can just about see some orange detailing, and it's basically there. That's where the 2 coach parking spaces and turning spaces are.
When you say orange detailing, which of the slides in front of members are you inviting us to imagine we can see orange on?
Slide 71.
71.
It's just
I'm struggling, to be honest.
yeah, it's not, yeah.
Let's tackle it slightly differently. Councillor Skinner has a concern about how much of the congested car park the coaches would have to go through. Are you as officers satisfied that it's not such as to make it difficult for the coaches to get in?
I mean, it is tight against existing car parking spaces, but I wouldn't say, yeah, we're not concerned, overly concerned or objecting to it at all, and neither is the highway authority. So
no, that's the important point.
Yeah.
Although it is private land, and I'm not sure they'd have all that much concern. But you've raised an interesting point. I suppose, in theory, if it does prove problematic, then they can adjust the internal layout on their own land, subject to not reducing the number of car parking spaces in total, without need for even a Section 73 application. But I'll leave. Am I right, Julia, on that? Yes. Yeah. So it is something that we can be monitored, and I'm sure that YMCA will want to ensure both safety for people coming and leaving this site and to make changes should it be a concern. Councillor, yes, Lisa, you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've just opened a larger plan on my screen. So if we can speak to Alexander to understand whether I can share my screen so that members can see. I'm not sure whether we can because we've never done it before.
That's a brave thing to do.
Okay. Give me one moment.
Technology. This is wonderful.
So hopefully you will be able to see quite soon.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I've actually got on my screen, that's a bit better. I've got the toolbar across the bottom. Thank you. Well, I can either see 4 bus. Is it 4 bus bays? Oh, it's there. Ah, it's there. I'm sorry. I was looking in completely the wrong. There's nothing orange there.
No. I think I've chosen a different plan.
Yes, you have. That's Coach Bay 1 and Coach Bay 2 there. That's good. So that therefore means that the cars in that row can go in and come out in different directions unless coaches are suddenly in one of those 2 coach bays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Skinner?
It does, Chairman. I was just more concerned that the spaces to the north, that the vehicle is going to have to swing round and potentially reverse into those spaces, that I would suggest.
Yes.
And therefore they would lose some spaces to the north of the of there. But anyway.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that, Councillor. Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Gough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as a keen cyclist, I would like to encourage more people to go to the village by bicycle, and if they can't go on a bicycle, use public transport, because public transport are in dire need at the moment because nobody's using the bus services at the moment. If we don't use the buses, we'll lose them altogether. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I didn't know you were a cyclist, but I do now. But thank you. And your point is very valid. And of course, the benefit of this location is it's immediately in front of the Sustrans route. So anybody like your good self who is a cyclist and has concerns about traffic on Bowbridge Road, do use the Sustrans route. Right, I've got nobody else wishing to speak. I very much welcome this. I very much welcome the fact that the facilities building is now underway. And I think that the facility we're going to have here is infinitely greater than anything that was ever imagined those years ago when we set out on this project. And I think YMCA are to be congratulated for what they're bringing to fruition. It'll be something the envy of almost any other town of the size of Newark. Okay, go straight to the vote therefore. Helen?
Okay, Councillor Blaney.
4.
Councillor Brazier.
4.
Councillor Brock.
4.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Mrs Dales.
4.
Councillor Mrs Dobson.
4.
Councillor Gough.
4.
Councillor Mrs Holloway.
4.
Councillor Mrs Rainbow.
4.
Councillor Mrs Saddington.
4.
Councillor Skinner.
Very much 4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ivor Walker.
4.
And Councillor Keith Walker.
4.
That's unanimous 4, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we now move on to late item 13A, the proposed response to the downtown designer outlet. Members have, of course, had an electronic copy of this. It came out at the end of last year. It is on our website for those who are not present in this meeting and may be viewing us through the YouTube channel. So Lisa, over to you, if I may, please.
Thank you. Yes, and I anticipate most members will be fairly familiar with this because it was presented to Planning Committee previously. So the proposal is within South Kesteven's authority area, and because of the scale of it, we are a statutory consultee. So the proposal is an outline application for a designer outlet centre of up to nearly 20,500 square metres of floor space, which comprises a mixture of, this is the former use class orders, obviously they have been revoked with changes last year, but retail, A1, restaurants and cafe and storage, garden centre and so forth. So we responded previously and attended their committee and gave our objection to the proposal. Since that time, I understand they've had a new plan, which has resulted in them reconsidering this application because they still haven't made the decision on it. So they've updated their data and undertaken a further retail assessments. And the key ones for us is the impact that it will have on Newark Town Centre. So set out in the report that the approval of this scheme, if implemented, would have a detrimental impact on the retail town centre of around 9% in terms of footfall. There was a proposal, and I believe there still is, to have a Section 106 agreement to prevent any occupier taking up a unit where they have a retail presence in our town centre, such as White Stuff, etc. However, we have concerns regarding the ability to actually enforce that. So report sets out our concerns and we maintain our objection, and subject to members' agreement, we would like to pass that back as our consultation response. Thank you, Chairman.
Lisa, thank you very much. And you said the members would recall this. In fairness, the decision was taken by South Kesteven in February 2019, prior to the new council and prior to the revised composition of this committee. So there'll be a number of members to whom this is new. I think the real concern here is not that there is just this application for a designer village, but that South Kesteven as a council had already granted consent for a designer village on the south of Grantham, and the presence of two so close together was a real concern about the ability to leach away trade from a very wide surrounding area. So, Councillor Mrs Dobson.
Chairman, I'd like to say that it'll more than kill Newark. It'll just finish it off. The retail section, it'll finish it off. But I don't think 9%, Lisa, with the greatest respect, is enough. I think it'll be a lot more than 9%. And like Roger Blaney has said, they've already given themselves planning permission to do one south of Grantham. Why on earth would they want to do one north of Grantham? You know, this is when I get a bit concerned that we don't seem to communicate with our nearest, closest neighbours. And we're all struggling. Grantham is as dead as a dodo. We're not far behind. In fact, we could be about the same. I know we're looking at all sorts of new things and new approaches, but we really have got to start learning to work together for the benefit of everybody. And I think, Lisa, I would like our officers to be able to be as strong as that with the officers at South Kesteven. I'm sure the members at the end of the day in South Kesteven are not there to just take everything, leech everything away from anywhere and everywhere. And really, you know, we've got to think about everywhere and everybody. And if we don't, then we may as well all pack our bags and go home and not bother. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, as the report makes clear, the success of the bid from the Towns Fund, the securing of the full £25 million, gives us a real opportunity of both repurposing and transforming Newark and its local economy, but that's going to be made that much more difficult if this goes ahead to the south. Now, in February 2019, uniquely, because to my knowledge, no member from Newark and Sherwood Planning Committee has made representations at another authority before, certainly in my 30 years on this committee. But I did that with Matthew Norton in support in February 2019. And you will see from the report that we wish to make a request that if it is going back to the committee and their standing orders permit, that there should be an in-person representation before they take the decision. And if this committee was happy, I'm certainly happy to go and speak to South Kesteven committee again, as I did a couple of years ago. But the recommendation is there, and I'm happy to move that recommendation in accordance with Lisa's suggestion. Maureen, you are not muted, so I'll give you the pleasure of seconding that if you wish.
Yes, I'll second it, Chairman, and agree that we do need you and Lisa there to actually voice our concerns, not our objections to South Kesteven trying to expand and produce goods for themselves, but we need to work together.
Okay, lovely. And I note you say, Lisa, it will be a judgment as to whether it is Lisa or whether it is Matthew Norton, whether it is a development control or a policy matter. So if you'll bear with us on that. But if everybody is happy, do we need to go around? Is there anybody who is dissenting from that? I don't think so. So that is therefore, Helen, I'm assuming without dissent, that is therefore carried unanimously.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we now go back to the agenda. And
Chairman,
I apologise. I took that as agenda item 13A. Yeah. Nobody corrected me. I completely forgot, Lisa. I'm so sorry. Planning application validation checklist. So we go back to agenda item 12, but I'm sure we will, the minutes will record matters numerically rather than the chairman's failure to understand what comes after number 11.
Chairman, before you start your discussion, I did say I'd got to go at 5. It's 2 minutes to, so I'll go now. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Okay, thanks very much, Mrs. Dobson. Goodbye, Maureen. Okay, Lisa, planning application validation checklist.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. 2 late representations were circulated to members yesterday. So the first one was from Balderton Parish Council, whose objection relates to surface water, and they would like details submitted for every proposal that we have to consider surface water. And also, and I'll come back to that in a second, and also we've added an additional application type of a prior approval of renewable energy, because that was missed off the application type list. So referring back to Balderton Parish Council's comments, we're only able, and this responds to a lot of the comments that are set out in the table in the report, which are at pages 165 to 194. A lot of, typically the town parish councils would like us to request a lot of information that we're not legally able to ask for, or it's not reasonable for us to ask for. And in terms of any application that we have for an application, it has to be appropriate, relevant, etc. to the scheme that you have in hand. So lots of comments. In total, we received 26 responses, which from experience is a really good response. From a variety, so both from the town parish councils, but consultees as well as developers and their agents. So all of their comments are set out in the report. Lots of them have resulted in changes to the checklist, and where changes are being made, they've either been added in blue or they've been crossed out. So I don't propose to say anything further unless members have got any specific questions that they would like me to respond to.
Thank you very much. Do members have any specific questions? I can't see anybody wishing to raise anything. Can I thank, Lisa, can I thank you and whoever has been instrumental in drawing together this substantial document? Can I echo your comments that 26 responses may not seem very much, but on what is a more technical document than many of those that we consult on, I was pleasantly surprised that we did get those 26. I understand the concerns of parish councils that are focused on flooding. I understand the concerns of the developer industry, but of course, as the report makes clear, we will only be looking at those things which are relevant to individual applications, and it's right that our checklist should be as comprehensive as the document we've got here. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations that it should be adopted, the amendments in response to consultation outcomes, and that we continue to review on a 2-yearly basis. So formally move as recommended. Vice Chairman.
Seconded, Chairman.
Yeah, you know, I find this fascinating. You are showing up, Vice Chairman, as being muted on my screen, and yet you're able to talk. Oh. I've always known you were able to talk, but not when there's a muted sign on the screen. But there you go. Obviously omnipresent. Therefore, again, as per the last item, I'll take it that that is agreed unanimously unless any member wishes to dissent. Saves 30 seconds of our lives. Right, therefore, Helen, that is unanimously supported. That was agenda item 12. Agenda item 13 on page 271 is the annual review of exempt reports. There is only one item there, which came up 2 months ago. It is my judgment as chair that that still is relevant to be kept as exempt. I will therefore so move from the chair. Vice Chairman.
Seconded, Chairman.
Is there any dissent from that? Nothing you wish to say, Lisa? So let us therefore, again, Helen, unless anybody wishes to disagree, then that's unanimous on that. That is therefore unanimous. We move on to agenda item 14, to note the appeals lodged, and appendix B, the appeals determined. Everybody happy with that? That therefore completes the agenda. It's nice to get back to a long meeting after some fairly short ones. Can I thank you for your attendance and your contributions this afternoon? And with that, I formally close the meeting. Thank you all. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Julia.